News just coming in. India has officially expressed concern over the US decision to supply F16 spare parts to Pakistan. Union Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said he conveyed India's concerns at the recent US decision to provide a sustenance package for Pakistan's F16 fleet. The United States, of course, has made it clear no new aircraft are being sold to Pakistan. No additional aircraft are being given to Pakistan. However, this remains a cause for concern for India. Pakistan had used F-16s against India. Pakistan had claimed that its F-16 fleet is to fight terrorists. But the one thing is very clear, that Pakistan is using these F-16s actually to target India. We bring you that big story on India Today. Also on India First, disengagement has taken place to an extent, but what does disengagement actually mean on ground at the line of actual control? Will it lead to de-escalation? Will it lead to de-induction? Should Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping resume summit-level dialogue? Will they at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization? Many of these questions, we'll try and get you some answers. But first, as always, let's get started with the headlines on India First. Actor Jacqueline Fernandez questioned by Delhi police for 9 hours in connection with the 200 crore extortion investigation. Sources tell India Today there were inconsistencies in Jacqueline's response and Sukesh's aide, Pinky Rani. Nora Fatehi has also now been summoned for questioning tomorrow. Congress party splits in Goa. 8 out of 11 Congress MLAs joined the BJP, including former Chief Minister Digambar Kamath. In the 40-member Goa Assembly, Congress now reduced to just 3. BJP has 20. Bengal blame game over Kolkata violence. Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee breaks her silence after 24 hours, accuses the BJP of getting goons from outside to create unrest in Bengal. Language war takes center stage in Karnataka. Former Chief Minister H.D. Kumaraswamy protests Hindi Divas. Bomai says there is no question of neglecting Kannada. Supreme Court gives a green signal for longer tenure both for Saurav Ganguly and Jay Shah at the BCCI. Says office bearers can have 2 consecutive terms. I want to return to our top story, and this is India officially expressing concern over US decision to supply F-16 fighter jets, spare parts and upgrades to Pakistan, a state sponsor of terror. Union Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said he conveyed India's concerns at the recent US decision to provide a sustenance package for Pakistan's F-16 fleet. The US has made it clear that no additional aircraft or no new aircraft are being sold to Pakistan. But there is an upgrade package, a software upgrade, a hardware upgrade, spare parts are being given, engines will be given, and this is through the FMS or the Foreign Military Sales route, which means Pakistan will have to pay the same price, $450 million, that US Air Force would have had to pay for spare parts or upgrades to Lockheed Martin. But for India, this is a major cause for concern. Remember, Pakistan has used F-16s against India. Pakistan may claim its F-16 fleet is to combat terror. But that's clearly not what is happening on ground. And we've seen this. We've seen this in the aftermath of the Balakot airstrike. Pakistan used its F-16 fighter jets, of course, rather unsuccessfully. But is the US so myopic, especially not just after Balakot, but also after what happened at Kakul, Pakistan Military Academy, Kakul? I want to cut across to India Today's Shiv Arur Fomo on this. And Shiv, the United States doesn't seem to have learnt any lessons despite Osama bin Laden being found near Pakistan Military Academy, Kakul, Abbottabad. He was found there, hiding in plain sight, hidden by the Pakistani army and the government, and yet US continues to arm a state sponsor of terror. Shiv, what does this mean for India?
Well, Gaurav, I don't think it's surprising at all that the Indian Defence Minister has conveyed his concerns and reservations, to the United States. The fact is, India has already registered its protest diplomatically over what it sees as, assistance being supplied by the United States to Pakistan for its F-16 fighter jet fleet, which the entire world knows has been used against India and not really against terrorism. In fact, all of its arsenal, much of it US supplied, has been basically used, in aggressive maneuvers against India rather than its stated use of, in the war against terror. The United States has clarified. We had a recent, interview with an Assistant Secretary of State as well, where he said this was a sale of, maintenance equipment and spare parts for the F-16 fleet, which is something that the US has always committed to do, and not assistance in that sense or aid being given to Pakistan. But that doesn't really cut much ice with India, because remember, Lockheed Martin, the company that manufactures F-16 fighter jets and these parts, is one of the companies that's actually vying for a large Indian Air Force contract to build, upgraded versions of those same jets here in India. So that completely apart, the very fact that India and the United States, have been trying to take their strategic relationship ahead, with rapid strides, especially in the field of defense cooperation, sharing of information and intelligence. It sticks at the back of the throat when the United States continues to offer, assistance, or call it sales, or whatever you may, want to call it, for frontline defense equipment that Pakistan has frequently used, as recently as in 2019, just before the Balakot airstrikes against India. So this is a situation where I don't think India has a choice but to register its protest. But it's a complicated issue because these are legacy systems that have been in Pakistani service for a very, very long time now. So it's going to be a difficult one to navigate, but totally protocol for Rajnath Singh to register India's protest.
Shiv, for joining me here on India First, many thanks. I now want to shift focus to the other big story we're tracking here on India Today. The disengagement at multiple friction points. That's over along the line of actual control. It's been announced both by India and by China. But what does this disengagement actually mean on ground? Are we creating buffer zones? How long will these buffer zones remain? Has China actually succeeded in altering the line of actual control to China's advantage? And will there be de-escalation before ultimate de-induction that India had sought before normalization of relationship between India and China? There are multiple questions, few answers. The opposition wants the government to clarify before resumption of dialogue with China at the summit level. From disengagement along the south bank of Pangong Tso after the quid pro quo operations on Kailash Hills in February 2021 to the disengagement at Patrol Point 15, Gogra-Hotsprings, completed on September 12, 2022. India and China have disengaged from the multiple confrontation points where the two armies clashed in the summer of 2020. Galwan, this area, saw a fierce clash at the line of actual control. 20 Indian soldiers, led by Colonel Santosh Babu, made the supreme sacrifice. According to Russian agency TASS, China lost at least 44 soldiers in this clash. North and south bank of Pangong Tso. The clashes started at the north bank of Pangong Tso late April, early May. India's quid pro quo operations forced China to agree to disengagement. Patrol Point 17A. Disengagement also took place at PP 17, reducing chances of a repeat of Galwan. PP 15 at Gogra-Hotsprings. Disengagement was completed and mutually verified on September 12, 2022. Depsang in the north and Demchok in the south, however, remain friction points in eastern Ladakh. Both these friction points predate the April-May 2020 standoff? Has the September 2022 disengagement paved the way for a summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping? The opposition has come out all guns blazing on the disengagement.
पिछले 2 दिनों से बहुत शोर मचाया जा रहा है हॉट स्प्रिंग पेट्रोलिंग पॉइंट 15 से डिसएंगेजमेंट को लेकर, लेकिन सच्चाई बड़ी भयावह है। और सच्चाई ये है कि जिस पेट्रोलिंग पॉइंट 15 तक हम गश्त करते थे, अब वो बफर जोन में आ जाएगा और हम वहां पर गश्त करने के अपने अधिकार को खो रहे हैं।
The opposition does not want a return to summit level engagement till disengagement leads to de-escalation and ultimate de-induction of additional forces.
चीन से आपने कहा कि चीन पीछे हट रहा है। भाई कहां हट रहा है चीन? डेप्सांग डेमचाक में तो चीन बैठा हुआ है। हाँ, 50,000 हमारी फौज, उनकी फौज खड़ी हुई है, तो इस पे बात ही नहीं करते।
Strategic experts, however, believe China's aims are never short-term.
Depsang has been an older issue, and Demchok. These are the two places which are very important, and there have been still discussions are going to be held on them after this. But I would presume that it will only happen in case there is a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping, and then we might see some kind of a withdrawal of forces on both the sides.
Both India and China have deployed over 50,000 troops each close to the LAC in Ladakh after the standoff. The situation along Depsang and Demchok is yet to be resolved.
There were some indications that some breakthrough might happen, so you can see it as a continuation of that process. I think the disengagement is happening under the broader discussions between the two countries.
Despite 16 rounds of talks at the level of corps commanders, China is yet to de-induct its troops. In fact, China is building additional air bases, missile silos, long runways, radar stations and roads along the LAC in Ladakh.
This is a welcome beginning, but we have a long way to go. There definitely are 3 stages for this ensuring peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. That is disengagement, de-escalation and de-induction.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has linked normalization of India-China ties to return of peace and tranquility along the LAC. Is disengagement the first step in that direction? With Geeta Mohan in Samarkand, Bureau Report, India Today. And we are told Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived for the SCO summit, Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. But before that, ahead of the SCO summit tomorrow, it's a respect for Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Tashkent. These images that you see on your television screen, video of a wall carpet with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's face in Uzbekistan's capital city of Tashkent. The India Club in Tashkent has this, they got this special carpet woven to honor Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The Prime Minister is expected to attend the SCO summit at Samarkand, the first in-person summit after 2019. The opposition back home wants more clarity. What's happening at the line of actual control? Have we created a buffer zone in our own country? What does disengagement actually mean? We've seen a terse statement from the government, but details are scarce. Should Parliament be taken into confidence at this stage, or does it remain work in progress? Joining me on India First, Lieutenant General Sanjay Meston. General Meston knows the lay of the land here. Abhijit Iyer Mitra is a senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. Supriya Sule leads the Congress charge. Geeta Mohan, a foreign affairs editor, joins us from Ground Zero in Samarkand. And Geeta, will there be an India-China summit on the sidelines? Are there any signs of a thaw in India-China relations?
Well, Gaurav, looks highly unlikely that there would be a structured meeting between the two sides. But yes, there could be a pull aside. There is no confirmation from either side, but they are going to come face to face for the first time since Galwan. This is the first time that the Chinese president has actually stepped out of the country. And so they went in one room. The Gogra-Hotspring disengagement will certainly act as a catalyst in all probability for them maybe to exchange words where Prime Minister Narendra Modi will say more needs to be done, that there are areas that are now the focus areas, which is Demchok, Depsang. These are areas very critical to India, and traditionally the Chinese should go back to where they were,
Okay.
and then maintain status quo. So there could be a conversation, but no structured dialogue between these two sides, although an environment certainly has been created for them to maybe at least acknowledge each other, because if this were not to happen, Gaurav, there would have been no acknowledgement. Forget a shake hand. So certainly a forward movement, but in all probability, if that opportunity arises, it would be to convey to the Chinese that there needs to be more that needs to be done for the environment to be
Stay
called
with
business
me.
as usual.
Okay, clearly not business as usual. Supriya, there is disengagement at the 2020 friction points, not Depsang and Demchok yet. They predate the 2020 events. 16 rounds of talks have happened. Is the Congress not convinced about disengagement, and whether this would lead to de-escalation and possibly ultimately de-induction?
Thank you for having me on the show, Gaurav, and a very good evening to my fellow panelists. I don't think it's about us being convinced. I think we are a little worried, like many others in this country are. Because in the name of disengagement, are we giving up our patrolling points? And I'm just going to point out 3 examples. Patrolling point 15 at the Hot Springs, patrolling point 14 at Galwan, patrolling point 17 at Gogra, and the fact that Chinese troops continue to be at the Y crucial junction at Depsang and also Demchok. The reality is, and this is what we are worried about, that are we giving up our patrolling points? Land that we had access to patrol is being covered now in buffer zones. We already gave up our access to Blacktop, which the army got with huge effort. That is a big concern. And the big concern is foreign policy being pursued by keeping the domestic audience in mind? Is the whole narrative being built to just ensure that the Prime Minister's image is being restored? Because quite frankly, whatever we may do, there can be no compromise with territorial integrity of India, and also, our sovereignty. We cannot take it lying down that 20 brave hearts died, and today, whether it's Depsang and Demchok, one doesn't know, large areas of our land have been converted into buffer zones, almost 1,000 kilometers square of that land. So I think it's important to have the government answer these questions.
Fair enough.
Abhijit,
merit in the Congress pointing this out, or should the nation, as of now, looking at the disengagement that is happening, and China was against disengagement at PP15, should the nation adopt a wait-and-watch approach?
So, by its fundamental nature, a buffer zone is patrollable, right? Especially these kind of buffer zones. This isn't the Korean demilitarized zone, which is a completely different nomenclature from a buffer zone. I can tell you something that we've seen both at Pangong, at Foxhole Point, and at Gogra-Hotsprings, which is everywhere that Indian Army bases were. There are military bases now significantly forward of those bases. The scale and size of them are highly variable, but they are significantly to the front, as in closer to the LAC as we understand it, everywhere that the disengagement has happened that we've seen. This includes Gogra-Hotsprings, and this includes Foxhole Point. Before, for example, there was a ITBP base, a large ITBP base somewhere between 3 and 4, fingers 3 and 4.
Yes.
Today there is a base right on finger 4 itself. It's a small base, but it is right there. It is a physical occupation of that area. Similarly, in Gogra-Hotsprings, what we saw is where the valley from the north coming down south is, the Chinese had come through that valley and occupied that little Y area, where the river curves.
Yes.
Today there is an Indian army base out there, which is significantly north and significantly closer to that particular valley than it was before. So I don't know what, because in my book, when army bases move forward, that is not a sign that you're moving backward.
Okay.
I think that's how logic works.
But I want to bring in General Meston. General Meston, the impression is, and weigh in on that, you've been deployed on ground, weigh in on the progress so far, weigh in on the road ahead, but the fact that if we were going up to PP15 earlier, or if we were going up to the PP14 at Galwan, as of now, there is a 3 to 5 kilometer, in some instances even more, buffer zone where neither the Chinese are coming nor the Indian troops are going. So does this buffer zone actually mean that we've moved back in our own country? The Chinese may not be coming there, at least as of now. The troops may be deployed on either side, but we've created a no-clash zone.
Gaurav, good evening. My take is as follows. Firstly, when I speak as a soldier, and also I speak as a person who's got the country's interest foremost always in his mind. So no association to any political parties. Now, firstly, the intent. Let's start with the end state. The end state for India and China is very clear. Both sides are looking for peace and tranquility on the border. Now, obviously, there have been perception differences on the line of actual control, and therefore both sides have different perceptions of claim lines, and therefore to dominate these areas, we were sending patrols, and even the Chinese were sending patrols into so-called their perceived line of LAC. Now, this is the bone of contention. How do we resolve it? Now, you have rightly termed these as friction points. Now, what happens in these friction points? Galwan is a live example. When two patrols, they come on a face-off, at times, at the lower level, sometimes dispute does arise, and a little error or something on any part of the soldier of either side can lead to a major issue, and the way it happened in Galwan. Okay. We were in our area of patrol. So perception has been varying on ground. Now, coming on to this disengagement, these have been processes which have been drawn up very deliberately. There have been substantial negotiations. It is not that overnight this decision has been taken. These talks are being headed by lieutenant generals, corps commander level, so that is of seriousness, and the Ministry of External Affairs is addressing this issue. Now, what has happened on ground? On ground, there has been the disengagement, and therefore the implication is, when there is a disengagement, the perception lines of the perceptions were varying, and therefore our patrol will not go to their area, their patrol will not come to our area. So therefore, mutually, it has been decided upon, agreed upon, no one has retreated, it is only to avoid a friction or a clash.
Let me bring in Supriya Sule. Supriya wants to respond to this point. Sir, you know, militarily you've answered the question. Supriya, the government says they've brought in the Rafale fighter jets, the S-400 systems, some are in, others are coming in, there's more military hardware that is coming in. India has actually displayed nerves of steel, forcing China to disengage when China had claimed it will not disengage. Should the nation wait and watch how things unfold in the months ahead?
As we should, and I'm glad we are showing nerves of steel, and I have no doubt in my mind that the Indian army will always show nerves of steel. That is what their valor and courage has always got us. I mean, I have no doubt about that, and I'm very proud about the fact that we are showing nerves of steel. I think the apprehension is coming in from 2 points. The whole debate around the Ladakh problem, for the last 31 months there's been tension at the borders, is that in the last 31 months, the whole idea was to restore status quo ante, which means status quo before April 2020. That has not been restored, and I'm not the only one saying that. Some generals in the army who fought in the area, I mean, the Kargil hero, listen to General Malik, what is he saying about this area? So it's not just us, it's not just me. And I think the other apprehension is coming in from one more thing. The apprehension is coming that at Doklam, you know, China and India did withdraw from China withdrew from the point of friction, but it has fortified the entire plateau. It has fortifications, it has built up, you know, fortifications on the entire plateau. And that is what the apprehension is. And mind you, this is my
So
last point.
China may have fortified. What about India? Has India done nothing?
Chinese PLA. On the Doklam plateau, please speak to people. Speak to the BJP MP from that area and listen to what he has to say. Speak to the Ladakh councillor. I heard the Ladakh BJP councillor today who said this is sham, this is a compromise, we are not disengaging really.
Okay.
I am not saying this, people from the BJP are. And one last thing that I want to say, the statement of the Prime Minister in June 2020, koi ghusa hua nahi
so
hai,
that,
is being used by China against
so
us.
that
We keep
we've
quoting
discussed
that
many
statement.
times in the
So
past,
the
but
Prime Minister
Abhijit, I
and
want to
Chinese
bring you
PLA
in.
can't be speaking in the same language.
Disengagement is a sham. A buffer zone has been created in Indian territory. Has China achieved its aim, pushing us back in our own country?
I would like to disagree on that statement, primarily for two reasons. One is that I can only go by satellite imagery. There's too much of tutu meme here, he said, she said here. I can only go by satellite imagery, which as far as I'm concerned, the commercial imagery that I've seen goes back to 2008. And from all the permanent infrastructure that India has ever built out there, I have seen a significant increase in permanent infrastructure and a significant moving forward of that permanent infrastructure. Number one. Number two, a status quo ante as is, we have to understand what does a status quo ante mean and how far into Chinese territory and how far into Indian territory are we going. Because if we go to a status quo ante and agree to all a stoppage of all infrastructure building in as per say June or July 2020, what would happen is China would still have significantly greater infrastructure on its side and we would have significantly less infrastructure on our side. Right, remember all the infrastructure projects in Ladakh started only in 2019, the significant ones. So we can't just go back to status quo ante, we have to protect our right to build significantly greater infrastructure out there. Okay. Point number three out here is we need to understand that the infrastructure China requires on its side of the Tibetan plateau is very different from the infrastructure that India requires on its side of the Indo-Gangetic plains. Remember, the mountain is the barrier here.
Yes.
For China to supply, the average height of the Tibet plateau is 10 to 11,000 feet. They require a lot more helicopter posts and things like that, whereas for us, it's a very short, quick flight to the border.
But General
so
Mexton, the threat remains grave because China is actually building up in a big way. So are we just postponing the inevitable, or is this disengagement a good first step which may lead to maybe de-escalation, but China needs to move back from Depsang because, Supriya Sule raises a fair point that they're apparently in control of a large tract of what we say is our territory, or what we insist is our territory.
I beg to disagree that they are in large control of our territory. No, that is not the case. See, the thing is, these areas of dispute and differences have been going since many, many years. It is not that it has just started off late. It has happened during 80s, 90s, and I was in the military operations directorate as a brigadier, so I am aware about it. So anyway, now coming on to Depsang itself. See, the Chinese claim is, they claim the entire Depsang, and we claim about 30 to 40 kilometers east of Depsang.
Yes.
So there is a big perceptual difference, and now we have also got a road right up to, I would say, it is going up to DBO. And even now, I would say the Karakoram Pass is connected to a Class 9 track.
Sir, I've had the privilege of driving on that road all the way up to the advanced landing ground on Daulat Beg Oldie.
So absolutely. And I would also highlight,
massive infrastructure development has taken place. I've run out of time on this part of the show. But for joining me here on India Today, many thanks. In the days and weeks ahead, we will be talking about this in greater detail because above politics, it's India first, especially on such a sensitive issue like India-China at the LAC.